Well, let's go ahead and get started. Hi, everybody. Welcome. Thanks for being here at our session. This is for arXiv, your first or second data set. And I'm Julie Lowndes from OpenScapes, and the session joined by an awesome team, Rachel Blake from Intertidal Agency, Joseph Gum, who's formerly NSF NCAR and currently independent, Eli Holmes from NOAA Fisheries, and the group is larger than this. We're a crew interested in how to teach folks how to archive their first or second data set. So thinking about how I'm from the R community, and something that was really helpful in our community was a resource called What They Forgot to Teach You About R that helped people who were longtime R self-taught users who could learn some better practices. So I think that could be an alternative title here too. Like maybe you've archived before, but what has changed? What's a good practice? How do you help support others to do this well? So this session is going to be a learning experience for me personally. Joseph Gum will shortly demo live how to do this. He additionally has a whole slide deck of resources, so we can come back and look at this self-paced. But a goal of this session is for us to learn as first-time learners, so we can turn around and teach other people how to do this well. Rachel Blake from Intertidal Agency is going to kick us off with a great overview of the whys and hows of this world, and I'm excited. I'm going to learn a lot, and I hope you all will as well. We'll then have, I'll just get out of the way. Rachel, here we go. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Julie. So I want to build on something Julie just said, which is if we forget to answer a question you might have in this presentation or in the demo, please just pipe up, raise your hand, raise your online hand, whatever the case may be, because some of us are so immersed in this that we might not realize that if you're publishing your first data set, you have questions that is so ingrained for us that we might not know that we need to address them. So please do ask your questions freely as we go through this. So as Julie mentioned, the plan is to give a bit of a background on data stewardship, the data stewardship mindset, and then Joseph will give us a demonstration of how to archive, and then it'll be the hands-on part where we hope you brought your own data set, or at least a data set you can play with that you have access to go into the archiving process, hands-on part. And really our goals for today are to provide you a welcoming first-time experience. This doesn't have to be scary. We want to show you some hands-on skills, give you some high-level guidance that you can take home and use in future efforts to archive or publish data. You'll notice that we might use archiving and publishing data interchangeably throughout this session. Just be aware that you can separate out meanings, but for today, they're going to be equivalent meanings, archiving and publishing data. Over the last 6 or so months, I've been hearing a lot of discussion around valuing data, understanding the impact of data. That can be measured in a number of different ways. The World Economic Forum has put this number up here that you see on the left as an economic benefit valuation. But a lot of these discussions have really come back to the idea that data can only have impact if it's usable, useful, and used. And that involves a lot of things, but what we're going to talk about for the next couple minutes is data stewards and data stewardship, and making that all happen. Data steward can be a job title. It can be a role or responsibility that maybe is outlined in your data management and sharing plan. But it also can be a series of practices that anyone can implement, and ultimately a mindset of what you do with data whenever you interact with data. And so I want to sort of put out there that anyone can practice data stewardship, and that we're all data stewards. So that's how we're approaching today's session. Wherever you interact with data throughout the data lifecycle, you can put these practices into play. So what do we typically talk about data stewards doing? Documenting data through writing metadata about the methods, the processes, the provenance, the journey that that data has taken, the contributors that might have made important parts of the data usable, useful. Data stewards oftentimes do work to protect the data, whether that's respecting data sovereignty or applying the appropriate license to that data to make sure that any future use is appropriate to that data set. Coordination efforts are oftentimes focused around the practices and the policies around tracking and managing the data itself. Talking about managing data, updates to the data, quality control, managing storage, and different copies and versioning. Sharing the data, that's essentially what we're talking about today with the archiving or publishing of data sets. Ways to maximize that reusability, that usefulness of the data. And then finally, building on that sharing is collaboration. So identifying data use cases, data partners that might be able to make that data more impactful by building upon those data sets once they're shared or published. So why publish a data set? There's been a lot of talk. I probably don't need to convince folks in this session about the importance of FAIR, but publishing data can help to increase the fairness of the data set. It can also be a really nice thing to do for future you and your future data users, because in the process of making the data more fair, in the publication process, you can also make it easier to reuse in the future. Getting credit and recognition can often be important for promotion, putting that data set out there for the world, getting a PID for it. That can be important for advancement, your CV, et cetera. Kate?
What is a PID?
Thank you for that question, Kate. So the question was, what is a PID? A PID is a persistent identifier. So we'll get into those a little bit more. I have a slide on definitions in a couple slides. So PID. So PID.
Oh, persistent identifier. I didn't even get the acronym. So, okay, great.
Okay, and then when we're talking about impact of data sets, we're ultimately talking about answering new research questions and making new discoveries. So that's some of the why of why we're talking about publishing data sets here. Key terms and concepts. Okay, here we go. Persistent identifiers. On this slide, you'll see three of them. The three bottom ones, a DOI, a digital object identifier. You may be familiar with that one. You may yourself have an ORCID. That's an individual researcher ID. And then increasingly, organizations are using the RORs as a way to identify themselves consistently through data management plans, through publication of data sets. Metadata is critical. I don't think I need to explain metadata to this the attendees of this session, but data packaging is another thing that'll come up as we talk about archiving data sets here. So I'm going to pause for any other questions on terms that I may have thrown out there that people are unfamiliar with. Do we have folks online that?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Eli.
A couple slides back, you mentioned data publishing. And you kind of made a comment like, oh, we're going to, the way you said it made me think you were like, well, we're going to call it data publishing, and that's going to cover a few different ways that you can put out data. And I wondered if you could kind of talk a little bit more about that, like the difference between like a data publication, say, and what we'll be doing, which is like we're publishing data in data repository, but I think you wouldn't call it a data publication?
So what we've called this session Archive Your First Data Set. That's a term that's used often for putting your documented data in a repository. Publishing your data is also used for that process. And so that's why I said I will be using those terms interchangeably today. But what we're talking about, and Joseph will get into this in more detail in the demo, is putting a documented data set on Zenodo, which is the repository that we're talking about today, and with the persistent identifier, a DOI in this case. Does that answer your question?
I think what you were asking is maybe what's the difference between a data descriptor, which is a peer-reviewed publication about a data set, and publishing a data or archiving the data set in a repository, which are two different things.
Maybe I'm showing my age, but, back before, like, we just put data up on, like, Zenodo, there's this thing called a data publication. Maybe that's just not. Summarize it. Once you want to.
Yeah, I'll repeat the whole thing, that maybe I'm showing my age, but back in the day, before we could just put data like up on Zenodo, like right now I could, we had something called data publications. And like you submit this to, it felt like a journal, but it wasn't exactly a journal because they were a data repository, but there was like some review, and then there was like all these methods, descriptors, and I don't know.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. I think that what I would call that is like a data paper, right? And I'm familiar with that in the context of like a journal where you can publish essentially a paper that's a description of your data set. So it's not the actual CSV file or the NetCDF file, or it's not the actual data themselves, but it's a description that points you to where the data actually might be. And that's another way of sharing information about the data, but it's not actually archiving or publishing the data itself. So we're not going to be talking about data papers today. We're going to be talking about the actual data sets and metadata and getting those into a repository. So hopefully that clarifies things. Okay. Key terms. I'm going to hand it over to Joseph now.
Okay, who wants to see me not embarrass myself with a live demo right now? Yeah. So we, as it said, I am formally at NSF-NCAR, and we just did a migration of one of our repositories to the GDEX repository to Zenodo. We covered that in the session right before this, case studies of transitioning data sets from specialist to generalist repositories. If you weren't there, you had to be there, man. Like, it was amazing. I don't even remember anything that happened in that session. But we are talking not just about any repositories, but generalist repositories here. We usually differentiate them in three ways. We have the generalist repositories that'll take just about anything from anyone, anywhere, as long as it fits. They can take it, but they will not take a whole bunch of spam or people putting pirated files up. That's not what they do, and they would be sued so hard and disappear immediately. And then after that, we get into institutional repositories, say run by universities, nonprofits, for-profits, and they might cover a slightly smaller set, just the people in their community. After that, we have specialist repositories that are generally for their different domains or disciplines. And so what we did was transitioning from, I guess I'll stay here for now, a specialist repository to a generalist repository. So there will be maybe a little bit of assumption about FAIR and metadata and whatnot. If you want to follow along and tell me how well I do or do not follow the slides, you can follow the slides while I do the live demo from the top of my head. I actually have screenshots, and if Zenodo was down today, you could actually do the whole thing from the slide deck. Lots of reminders to save your work in progress. Don't lose it if your computer loses power. But yeah, that's where we are. I'm going to talk a little bit about the specifics of Zenodo. Zenodo implements a subset of the data site metadata, a very commonly used, very generic form of metadata that covers things like, do you have a title for your data set? Are there actually files in this data set? Do you have a persistent identifier that links to your data set? Who are the people that made this? And so more specifically for us, because this is a geoscientific community, there is no ISO 19115, 19139 support in there right now. And just generally, there isn't much support for any geoscience specialized vocabularies, ontologies, rendering geographic displays of where your data set might look over, things that are nice to have in our specialist repositories that just aren't there in Zenodo yet. But it's open source. You could add it yourself. You could go there right now and do it. But don't, because you have a live demo to watch. So stay here, please. And so Zenodo implements a subset of the dataset metadata, but a very complete subset. And likewise, because most of the deposits are done through the GUI rather than through the API they produce and maintain, the GUI has more features than the API. So if you are pushing features, if you're batch migrating data sets into Zenodo, you definitely want to use the API. You'll hit much less file upload timeouts using the API, but you do need to go into the GUI and manually accept and publish the data sets, as well as checking the features that just aren't available in the API right now. Zenodo has a record limit of 50 gigabytes, 100 files. You can talk to them and negotiate about this. They will give you extensions. They'll allow you to use more files if you have a really good reason, because your dog that talked to an LLM made 1,000 files is not a good reason. But they are generally willing to talk to any of us, and I've had very successful conversations with them in the past about this. And yeah, you may need to do some creative compression, especially if you don't have a flat data set, but you have a nested data set. You have multiple subdirectories going down. Then you're going to want to zip up, tar up your subdirectories so that you can serve them as one piece together. We will be using their public sandbox so that anybody can just try out the interface. Make sure that you don't screw anything up in production, and make sure that I don't screw anything up in production. And their user accounts are completely different. So if you have a Zenodo user account already, you will need to make a new one. Yeah, you can follow the live demo, replicate, do exactly all the steps that I do on sandbox.zenodo.org if you'd like to, or you can just watch me try not to make a fool of myself up here. Yes?
Is that limit is per
per record. So I could upload, I have uploaded 130 records. Not all of them are to 50 gigabytes, but a few of them get quite close. Between all of that, I have probably uploaded at least a terabyte of data to Zenodo. Yes, Kate.
I know one of the things that you put on Zenodo is the repository crisis scorecard.
Yes.
Which is a PDF and an Excel spreadsheet and other things. And those are just also data for the purposes of what we're talking about today. If I want to archive a giant manual of how to process data that my community has created.
Like the honey badger would say, Zenodo don't care. Zenodo don't care what you put on it.
Okay, great. So as long as it's under the size file limit, I can,
You can put anything that is legal to put up there.
great.
Different categories, like when you're uploading, you could say this is an image, or this is a publication, or this is a manual. There's more than one
That's right. So-
resource type.
Yes.
You have the complete resource list DataCite provides, so it could be
Yes.
any of those.
Yes, anything that counts under DataCite's resource list, and you can drive yourself insane looking at it without looking at the actual schema, which tries to explain what all of those resource types are.
And if I work at a place where I have a ROR or an organizational identifier, or I have to use the name of my agency, Zenodo's fine with that. It's like, sure, just stick it in there.
As long as it's in a publicly accessible database that's been integrated, RORs are integrated, you can autocomplete a ROR, and I will actually show that. Just a moment.
Excellent.
Yeah, so this is the data set that I will live demo in just a moment. The DOI is there, the archive.org copy of it is there. Don't look at the thing that said I did it last night, just before midnight in the link. And then I have the actual published Zenodo record as it stands right now, because it's live, it's online. That's what it looks like. And yeah, so we're gonna start with our required metadata. Or even before that, is this big enough for the people online, or do I need to make it larger, or in the room even? Sure. Oh. Okay. This is Zenodo. We can come over here, new upload. While that's still loading and thinking, this is the data set that we are going to migrate. And if it's not very apparent at the top, this repository is going to disappear on August 27th. This page will no longer be live. So that's why I made a archive.org copy of it, just for people in the future if they want to see and reproduce everything that's going on. This is what it looks like. This is, I would say, sort of somewhat typical of our researchers. This repository serves as both an institutional repository and a specialist repository at the same time, which may be somewhat unique, but NCAR is also a FFRDC, a national lab that specializes in atmosphere geoscience. So all of the data sets that we get are generally around those topics. We can see things like 18 gigs of data. We are not uploading 18 gigs of data. We're not going to sit here and watch that. But this is just what it looks like. These authors don't have the nice little ORCID badge next to their name, so we're going to have to look that up. We have some GCMD keywords that are here. If you have other keywords you like to use, you can put those in. Here's our support information. This is who the person is. And we even have some funding strings that are here, although they're not linked by PIDs, so it's sort of hard to track it back. I know they do data mining to sort of go back and forth on this. And we can see the different types of metadata that we put out. We're using the ISO 19139 metadata. That's what it looks like. This is what we eventually want to look like at the end. You can tell me if we have matched this 1-to-1, 100%, 95%, 110%, turn it up to 11. We'll see. Are people saying anything I should be aware of? No? Okay. So we're going to start just with the required information. These are the required things for DataCite metadata. So obviously, we need a DOI for this.
Why is that obvious? Like, you have one already?
Well, there's a red star next to it. Anything with a red star is required, or it'll just, it won't be happy with me. Dataset is at the top. That's by far the most common thing put into Zenodo, but you could put your lessons in there, you could put a model in there, you could put a physical object. How do you digitize a physical object? Well, that's on you to figure out. Publications. You can put preprints or whatever else in there if you'd really like to. More commonly, say things that aren't preprints, working documents, white papers that are made at conferences, meetings, working groups. That would probably be what you want. Here, the output management plan is a fancy European term for data management plan, data management sharing, open data management science plan, and all sorts of the other acronyms. But really, we don't care about any of that. I wish I had my mouse. Oops. We just have a data set. And then our title is this. I'm going to hide this completely. That also has a red star, so we need a title. Our publication date is not actually today, but April 5th. Not quite April Fool's either. So 4/05. And then our creators, we need to add their people that did this. And so we have Zhu Qingyu as our first person. Zhu Qingyu. You ever looked him up? Shh, that's later. You cannot assume any knowledge of your people when you do a live demonstration. Okay, so we've added all of our authors. Let's check if there are any other red stars in this basic information section. Nope, those are all the red stars. Actually, because we do need to upload a file, I'm going to download our metadata file right now. Control S, downloads, upload, downloads. And there we go, 25 kilobytes uploaded. Okay, so this looks right. Oh wait, Julie was right. We do have a DOI. So we're going to come back. I just hit the X, said, no, I actually do have a DOI. I'm going to go back, look for it somewhere, and just copy it from over here. Paste that in. And if we save the draft, this should give us a basic image. So if we were to publish this right now, this is what the data set would look like. That's okay. There's no description. Nobody really knows what it's about. It's not really linked to the paper it's supposed to be linked. It's just sort of floating out there, doing nothing. If a data set is on a cloud server somewhere and nothing links to it, does it really exist? Don't answer that. Think about it for a moment. Okay, just to make sure I am on description contributor file. Okay, so description. I chose this one because the description is very short. Less for my hands to move. That's not true. But it is short. And then as for contributor, we will do Qingyu. Here, we have to select a role for contributor. And this person is the person that submitted it to us. So they're the contact person. If you have any questions about the scientificness of the data set, or this data set needs to be revised, I found an error somewhere, or it doesn't compile for me, or I can't load it, this is how you would this is the information you would put. I think it's important to note at this stage, there is no place to put an email in there. So if you really want to contact somebody to contact your people, you probably need an ORCID at the very least, or some additional information about institution affiliation so that people can figure out how to get to them. Yes. Where's the?
If I use my ORCID to create my Zenodo account and then I start uploading data, is it always going to add me as a part of the record, or only
No.
who I enter for the
Only
data?
who you enter,
Right, okay.
yes.
So if I were someone who just really loved a data set and wanted it to be shared with the world, but had no legal or institutional affiliation with it, and was just maybe concerned that not enough people had it, I could post it and people wouldn't know that I was the one who posted it there, as long as it was legal, of course.
You'd make Steve Diggs really mad, but yes.
I would be listed as.
It would show under your account as you are the, if you look into your, this is not a question I fully expected, but if you look into your account, you can see all of the data sets that you have submitted, published, so to speak. I am not sure if someone
Who is not me can see that.
can, yes.
Okay.
I think the answer is yes, but that is metadata held outside of the DataCite metadata attached to the record, if that makes sense. So you can only see it on Zenodo, but if you're doing an automated knowledge web crawling of all the DataCite, of all the data sets in DataCite, Zenodo, wherever, your name will not appear there. Oops. How's that?
Great.
Yes.
So that, I actually find myself in exactly that situation where a data set I have a copy of has since disappeared from where it was originally stored. This may be more of like a social like etiquette thing. Like, do people do that of just copying data from other sources and chucking it up on Zenodo? Even if like I was not involved whatsoever in generating it?
I wouldn't say they just chuck it on generalist repositories, but if you looked on some place like archive.org, yeah, you could probably find something there.
I mean, the reason I'm asking that question in this way in a recorded talk is because the session in this room later today will be about the Public Environmental Data Project and the Data Rescue Project. And those are people who are going and finding publicly available data sets that may be at risk of disappearing and looking for places to publish them and publishing them on a Zenodo. And there is a concern for some people that if their name is listed associated with a data set that they have preserved on Zenodo, that there might be repercussions.
I
So that's beyond the
completely-
scope of this demo, and we can look into that later in the session at 2.
That is, okay, so I think there is an option to set your profile private on Zenodo. I'm not sure. But that's something that we could bring up with the developers in Switzerland and they can figure out. Any other questions? Eli, we'll get the mic to you.
So you're showing there, like listing the other contributors. Can you also list other admins? So I know like things I've put on Zenodo, like I can go back and post an update, like a new version, or I can edit the metadata. I can't like get rid of the thing, I think, but I can like edit metadata. So I'm thinking like, if I post something, you know, it's supposed to be there 50 years, I'm not going to be around in 50 years, so, yeah.
That is one of those existential questions that show how much of a data geek I am, because I do think about it at night before I go to bed. I don't think there's a really good answer to that right now, but I mean, if we look at previous records, they probably say, please contact the 12th Earl of Bedford with questions about this data collected by the HMS Victory in 1873. Don't quote me on that. That's probably not a real data set. But we've just added Eli to this. She doesn't have to be there. I will show that we can add an organization, and to be cheeky about it, because this data set came from NCAR, I worked in the CISL lab, Computational and Informational Systems Laboratory. I can add CISL, and it shows that the source is from ROR. So I can add the CISL lab, that's redundant. I can add CISL using their ROR PID to show that they are the person. And I mean, technically, I guess you could put the affiliation again while we're going off on tangents. That's a good question for all the PID people. And here you would put it as data manager in the data site metadata schema. The data manager are the people or organization that is responsible for the metadata, making sure that it's running fine in the repository. So that would be something that we could add right here. And if I actually save the draft, oh, there, it shows the little ROR icon next to it. So it shows that it is linked. Description, contributors, files, okay. Oh, I did that already. And I did that, I saved it. I'm so good, so far ahead of myself. Geospatial and temporal data. Like I said earlier, they don't have a good way of adding geospatial data, at least not in the way that we may like to think of it in terms of geofencing or other things. So we were just gonna have to manually add that. And so I'm gonna copy, paste this inside, call it additional description, and we'll call it notes for right now. We also have dates. So we can do this temporal range from, oops, here to there, just check that it's right, okay. And for us, we're just gonna call it valid right now because that is the range of time in the data set. We could add a description, but I really don't know what to put there, so we're just going to skip that for now. Let's save that again. You can use additional descriptions to patch lots of holes in things that we have in other 19115, Darwin Core, whatever you want to talk about, but isn't supported in Zenodo right now. GCMD keywords. So they have keywords, and if you were to just let it go, it would show you a whole bunch of well, they're probably medicines, given that they talk about dosage, adverse effects, agonists, derivatives. We don't care about that. So instead, what we're going to do, we're going to copy this and paste it in directly, press enter, copy the rest. Now you may be asking yourself, where are the UUIDs for the GCMD keywords? Wouldn't that be better to have? Yeah, maybe. It'd also be nice if NASA was able to turn the keywords into actual PIDs and have it be able to be linked better through that, I think. This is my opinion. But this is what we are doing right here for now. And that's about as good as we can do. Now, going back to this, there are some vocabularies, ontologies that are linked through Zenodo. Right now, they are primarily health, life science related because the NIH has been one of the primary funders and they're interested in life sciences. If you would like to add something that isn't life sciences, you can go ahead and make an issue on their GitHub tracker and they will get to it when they can get to it. Or if you help them write a proposal and an award, then you can actually fund them to do the work that you want to see done. Okay. Oh, yeah. And so, we have all of these vocabularies, things that aren't linked. The conventions near and dear to my heart are the climate forecast conventions. Those do not have DOIs per term, I think. And so, not that I'm saying I'm going to lead yet another cluster, but making an ad hoc recommendation for how to just add things into Zenodo as keywords from vocabularies that aren't integrated yet might be something that's interesting to do. Oops. Make sure you save often. Prevent data loss. Add funding. So for here, you can see that there are only 2 US funders that have open databases that you can query and get their strings from. For us, we are going to search for NCAR because this work happened at NCAR. And if any of them received any support from NCAR, whether working in the labs or getting salary, it should be added. So it'll add all of the necessary PIDs for that. But we also have all of these other funding strings. This from NASA, another one from the Air Force. So in the interest of time, we're just going to do the first NASA one. We'll add the string in there, and that'll be it for now. But because, whoops, add a custom award or grant, Air Force. Air Force Research Laboratory, I think it's this one for the Air Force One. Like, as long as it has a ROR or even an EDMO PID, you can generally find it. If you can't, you can just type in the name yourself. But that's less desirable. Whoops. Related works. Now, if we come over here, we can come back to over here, the dataset stores for this study at the, because publishers want to see the dataset before they publish it, the researchers ask for the data DOI, we give them the data DOI, and then they never come back and ask us what is, they never come back and tell us that their paper was published. And what is the, here's the nice DOI to that paper. It happens sometimes, but it's very rare. And I'm going to cheat a little bit. Remember these three names, they'll be on the quiz, 30 seconds. Related works is cited by this journal article. And it happens that this title is the exact same thing as the other title, well, almost, and they have the same three people that did it. So just a little bit of backwards sleuthing to figure out what it is, and then we can go copy the DOI out of the top and add it here in the related works. Oops. There's the DOI. Come on. Is cited by somewhere over here, probably further up on the screen that I can't see. And our scheme, DOI, we don't have to add a resource type, but we know that it's a journal article, so we'll stick with that. References, they didn't tell us if it references something else. If you have not gone down the related works, related identifier details, and you are asking yourself, why are there so many terms? And it seems a bit redundant, yes. It's kind of bad. They know about it. They want to fix it. They don't know how to do it yet. So save, preview. And if we look at it now, it's starting to shape up and look like something that's actually somewhat respectful, something that we could put in our own institutional or specialist repository. This formatting could be fixed for later. We have our funding strings here, grant number. This is linked to the PID. So if you were to dig into the XML or JSON or whatever, you would see that the PIDs are actually properly listed there. And we have the related work. So now that we've done that, let's add it to a community. We need to go back to editing. Select a community, my community, yes.
Why would you want to add it to a community? What is a community?
The community, primarily, first there needs to be a community that's made already. And then after that, hopefully that community is something that you really want to join, maybe because you're asked to by your supervisors or someone else, or maybe funders in the future will say, please add any work funded by NSF to the NSF community on Zenodo. Personally, I think the two best parts of the community are that you can use it sort of to get more statistics in there, get more metrics about people that are submitting to Zenodo. Researchers may not add their funding strings on their own. But if they're like, oh, I was funded by NSF, so I should put it in that community. I think that's a reasonable assumption to make, that some random person off the street would actually do that, rather than go back and look for what their funding strings are, their award numbers.
So it's a way to group records together, so like NOAA Fisheries could be a community, okay.
And the second part of it is that when I stopped at the beginning, just the required metadata, as long as you have all the required metadata in there, you could submit it to a community. And then the administrators, curators of that community could then go and do the rest of the metadata addition for you. So I've actually done that for our researchers, told that they can submit something, they insert the minimal metadata, and then they can send me an email personally or send me a message through Zenodo. It pings all managers, curators in the repository that, hey, a new record has been made. We can, somebody needs to look at this. And so then I see that, I can go through their chat interface and start saying like, so who are your other creators? Is this linked to a paper or something? Or I can double back a year or two later, hopefully after the paper has been accepted and published, and say, did you get a DOI? And that will send them an email that says, hey, yes, it was published. This is what it's called. Here's a DOI. And then I can go and finish adding that for them. You can be a part of multiple communities. So you could be a part of the NSF NCAR community and a part of the NSF community if one such existed. If you are part of, say, some NOAA fisheries, and then some specific NOAA fisheries lab, and then NOAA fisheries, and then NOAA, if they wanted you to add it to, say, all 3 communities, you could do something like that. There is some flexibility in how you can add them. But right now, you can only add 1 community at a time. So because this is the sandbox, there's all sorts of fun stuff, but I am I've made these for myself for testing. You can see there's no additional add button, it's just change or remove. Sure, yeah, almost done. So we'll just submit it for review. Yeah, okay. Comes to me. Here's where I can have a conversation with myself, comment back and forth. You can see the record itself, accept and publish, and then it will be live. Now, there are still things that are not perfect. We could still add the orchids for these people. I was intending to go back, and as Andrew alluded to, let me just copy that real quick, edit. No, this one doesn't work too well. Yeah. So we could do that, and if we saved, that would happen. You would see that everything is properly linked through. Let's see, what else? Just going into, this is what it would look like at the end. Some reflections on this. If you do bring over your own DOIs, those need to be manually redirected by you. You need to talk to your DOI mentor to do that. There were differing levels of recreation done during this migration process. I sort of categorized them into micro-curation, where people just didn't give us their PIDs, either their DOIs for their paper that they did, or they didn't give us their ORCID. But we have centralized databases, or after we find their publication, we can go and extract their ORCIDs. Mini curation, where we change things from like, oh, this data is for manuscript in review, to this data is for a published article in the journal, blah, blah, blah. And then there's major curation that I think we're all familiar with, or you may not be familiar with, but actually like changing the data to be more user-friendly. Yeah. And instead of doing all of this and all the time it took me to explain it, you can use the Zenodo API at the bottom here. Oh, I forgot to link the repository, but there is a repository. I'll link it through later. And then there are written notes for how I did this previously, if you want to see that later. And we've been taking questions all through this, but if there are any more questions now, I'm happy to take it.
There is a question online that I can ask, but I'm also curious, since this was, we had planned to have this be a workshop as well for folks who have brought a data set that want to do this with helpers live, and we can all learn together. So we can tee that up as well. We'll shift to that soon for folks online or in person. We can do that and also take more questions as that goes. So the question online, and Marcella, I'm happy to voice this, or you can unmute and ask. Go ahead.
Hi. Okay, I guess, yeah, I can just ask. We were talking about DOI preservation a little bit earlier, and I'm just wondering if you have a data set that's really big and you have to restructure it or compress it to fit into Zenodo, would you recommend minting a new DOI for the way that the data is now packaged, or preserve the DOI that you have already? Some kind of way to do.
That's a good question. I think personally, if you haven't actually changed the data itself, just sort of the packaging around it, turn it into a zip file, I wouldn't. I could see it going either way. I could see people that would say, no, you absolutely have to change it because you changed the number of files that are in that data set, you've changed how you access it, so that should be its own step. But at the same time, the important part, I think, the scientific value of it just has not changed. You haven't added more columns or more data or deleted anything, so that doesn't need to change. And in that case, I would think submitting to a different generalist repository that has larger file limits might be a better way to go than Zenodo. But Zenodo is the use case we have here right now.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. I kind of just wanted to canvas people because I'm sure the answer would probably vary from person to person too. So thanks for your thoughts.
Any other questions? I tried to make it as, well, I used an actual example of what we did. So that's why it's so detailed and probably ran over time. Okay, well.
Can I ask one follow-up question?
Yes.
You talked about publishing to repositories in general. Do you have any guidance on picking a repository based off the retention schedule, as repositories can say they have no, I guess, security in storing the data long-term, or they're guaranteeing it for 5 years or 10 years or 20 years. Repositories could disappear. So do we have guidance on how to select a repository?
I haven't seen any formal guidance on that. That could certainly be a paper or something that's written up. Maybe the NDSA, I forget what it stands for, off the top of my head, might have some guidance on that. Unofficially or personally, my preference would be Zenodo because it's funded by the European Union. as long as CERN exists, and possibly even after CERN disappears, because Zenodo is so useful, they will continue to fund it. One of the other generalist repositories, Figshare, was bought out by a for-profit publisher a few years ago. So the smaller ones have some sense of they could disappear. Other ones might have run into the same problem at some point. They might be nonprofit right now, and then they turn to for-profit later. And then all of the agreements you may think you have had in the past with them have now changed. So from my perspective, something like Zenodo is probably the best bet at this point. It could change in the future.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, if anyone would like to actually archive a data set into Zenodo and they'd like help, I'm happy to walk around the room and you can just put your hand up. I think we have people that'll be online and willing to answer questions online as well. What time is it? 12? Okay. Yeah. No worries.
Yeah, and maybe I'll join you, Joseph, and help get a sense. I have posed the question online to ask who, if anyone, has brought a data set to workshop. And I'll pose that question to the room as well, if you have one that you want to help, have experts with you. We'll prioritize that. And also, if it's useful to be asking this type of questions and screen sharing as we go as a group, we can also do that.
Yeah,
So,
I'm happy to do one up here.
yeah, okay, great. We've got a hand in the room.
I'm sorry to backtrack just a little bit, but yeah, I guess in the session description, there was a mention of NOAA Fisheries has a list of approved data repositories that staff are encouraged to use. Is that available? Oh, okay. Okay, so
Yeah.
okay.
And
I was just curious about that one. But.
yeah, and in the previous session, there was a discussion about whether any of these repositories on this draft list are NARA approved. And it turns out from people at NCI were saying, no, none of them are NARA approved right now.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Yeah, I did. I was at a different session, so I'll take a look at those notes. Thank you.
Yes.
So I have this is probably less common in the federal space because you guys maybe have more restrictions, but I work for a for-profit company, and so we generate data. I had a small ESIP lab grant, one of the reasons I'm here, and in the process of fulfilling that grant, I created a very large data set. Well, can't say that. I created a data set. There's always bigger fish, right? So I have a data set. It's currently sitting on an S3 bucket because we're a private company, we can do whatever we want, right? So I have it on a public S3 bucket. But converting it due to the file structure and the sizes into Zenodo would take time that I don't necessarily can bill out, right? So here's a scenario. I want to spend an afternoon and not a week DOIing it, detailing it in a place such as Zenodo, which I use a lot for all sorts of stuff. What do you think about that scenario? What's a good option where I want to make it public, I want to make it known, I would like a DOI, but I've got it in an external location that is public?
I mean, I think it's fine. You can use an alternate PID like an ARC or something else to refer to the location on the S3 bucket. What I would probably do in your specific case, I don't know if I said it. Yes, I did. LLMs are quite good at vibe coding. You could ask it to do to vibe code exporting the data on the S3 bucket into something that's tractable into Zenodo, and then ask it to then quote another program to move it from the now tractable data data set and then put it onto Zenodo via the Zenodo API, and you'd have something
Yeah,
that.
I mean,
Sure.
that's how it was created to begin with,
Yeah.
so, in large part. But yeah, if I were to do it that way, that's how I would do it. But even
Yep.
sometimes that time, you just don't have. So I was just curious, what are the best protocols in that scenario?
I don't know if you can bring it up. Like, I think on Zenodo, you can just put it, instead of uploading files, you can create a resource URL that points to the bucket. So you could just like write up all the required metadata. You could even provide, a script for hooking to your bucket, but down at the bottom, there's like a repository URL. You could just put the address of your S3 bucket
Yeah.
there instead of all your files. And then
You probably need a README file. Like
Yeah.
Zenodo will not always requires a file, but you just put your README file in there, and then you can link that with the repository URL. Yeah. Yep.
Awesome. I am going to pull us online. We've got some folks who are ready to submit their
Great.
records. Yeah, Jessica Morgan has submitted 6 already, which is amazing. We've got Dan and Phoebe ready to go. So would any of you please unmute and we can coordinate. Phoebe, if you'd like to go, if you're nearly ready to go, or if Jessica wants to show us what she's done already, what do you all think? And do you want to, yeah, we could also make breakout rooms if we want to. Yeah, I'm asking if they'll screen share, but we can also go in breakout rooms depending on the extent. Yeah, we're a small group in here, about 15 people in the room.
Yeah. We can stop sharing, and the first person to actually deposit or grab or ask for screen sharing privileges.
Okay, Dan is still trying to grab the data. That might take a few minutes. That's okay, great. Thanks for the update, Dan.
There we go.
Woohoo! Yay!
Yep. And you can see
What are we, is this Jessica sharing her screen? No.
no.
We're not sharing on Zoom right
We
now, so
can.
we're not
Oh.
seeing what.
Yeah. Let me throw it back up. Then. So here we are looking at it. We can see that some of them have their.
Sorry, what are we looking at? Where did you get it? Just to back us up.
So this is the DOI that she put.
Hi, so this is Jessica. I can't figure out how to turn things on, but hi, this is me.
Hey, go ahead.
And I wanted to show you an older Zenodo thing and what I'm working on now. So I am delighted to see that I've been doing things the right way. So that's great. And so, fun fact, this is a weird data set that doesn't fit into my agency's institutional repository because it's kind of social science, it's kind of not, but whatever. So I wanted to bring your attention to the keywords. So, in our agency, we like to use GCMD keywords, and there they are. And it is a pain. It would be lovely if Zenodo could, snuggle up to NASA and just build that in. Although I do wonder now that I'm thinking about it, are Earth scientists the only ones who care about GCMDs? What about because there's a lot in GCMD, but maybe it really is in the earth science sphere. So the other thing about the keywords though is if you clicky on those keywords, they become like tags. So clicky on the fourth one, not that one. Oh yeah, okay. So here you can see all of. So this is done in an era before communities were really a thing. So we were just using tags, and then you could click on a tag and share that URL to say, here are all of our labs, Zenodos, for example, and that still works. So, because I haven't really played with the communities and not really sure about the governance about figuring out like how that's going to work, but there's the older school idea of just using these keywords as like blog tags. And then there was one other thing that I wanted to ask about. If you could go back. If you can scroll down. Let's see. Okay, so can I ask your opinion about zipping up data files versus not zipping them up? Because so particularly in the GIS community, individual files is a pain in the butt to download, right? So you want them to be pre-loaded into folders or zipped up because you don't want to lose like an Esri extension or like ancillary file. But in general, what's a good practice for if you're not worried about the hitting the 50 gig limit, you just want to have a nice package, what's the best practice there?
As a former specialist curator, I would say you do what your community does. So if your community's best practices are to zip it up and put it all together, then you zip it up and put it all together.
Okay, great.
Go for it.
Oh, so somebody asked what a GCMD is. Did we cover that already?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, for the people in the room, NASA's Global Change Master Directory keywords are very much an earth science, geoscience thing. There are heliophysics keywords in there too, but it is maintained by NASA, and it is almost exclusively a thing that geoscientists care about.
Okay. Great. And so then I also put in the chat the data set I'm working on literally right now. I did bring a data set to your session, and I've been making some edits as we went along. You
Great.
explained something to me, so thank you so much. And I'll just say, for my hope is to be able to kind of train my PIs to do this themselves. We'll see how it goes.
Like other people have said, I am now independent. I also wear a third hat as a workshop organizer, hackathon coordinator. I'm happy to help if you need help. Andrew had a question in the room. I don't know where the mic is right now.
Yeah, I was just going to comment on Jessica's question about zipping. I think another thing to consider is use case. So let's say you have like a directory with 6 files inside of it, and there might be a use case where, and all 6 of those files maybe are large. There might be a use case where someone only wants to pull one of those files for reuse, and it stands alone by itself. It doesn't need the other 6. If you can fit them into your record without zipping them, it might make more sense to serve your product in that way so that your users can access the data the way it's intended to be used instead of an all or nothing approach. So that's another thing to consider in addition to what does your community do? What will your users do with this product? So in GIS, your users are going to need all 6 files of the shapefile, so putting it in a folder, keeping it together makes sense. But if I'm only going to pull the temperature CSV, then maybe keeping it separate would make sense.
Exactly.
I had a follow-up comment about the GCMD keywords. So I'm relatively new working as an affiliate at NOAA, but my background is in ecology. So, you know, the GCMD keywords are very new to me, but I definitely see, you know, quite a bit of value in using them. And we are using them for some data sets at the National Center for Environmental Information. So for example, for like the animal telemetry network, there are keywords, you know, like animal ecology and behavior, you know, biological classification, things like that. So they definitely have value beyond, you know, strictly, you know, like environmental information. So I guess just for, you know, like my ecologists or biologists or other, you know, other people out there that haven't heard of them, I definitely, yeah, see tons of value just to, you know, have a controlled vocabulary and, yeah, just makes it really nice to standardize the metadata, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I'll add a little bit more about GCMD since we're right here. Anybody can propose an addition to the GCMD keywords. There's an old school forum that you can go on and then ask them to add something. And then somebody will come along, look at it and review, go back and forth with you about what the description should be, where it should go, and then it'll get added eventually if it should be added according to their criteria. Generally, I think mostly NASA people add to it because that's their community. But also the NASA GCMD keywords have a very wide-ranging life outside of the US. It is now a part of an international organization, so they are sort of the standard environmental geosciences keywords for this group of disciplines, this community. So if you're looking for data set level keywords, data set descriptors, that is what you would put there.
Great. And I see in the chat, Jessica says NOAA also requests new GCMDs, not only
Yes.
NASA. Great. Thanks,
I
Jessica.
very much believe that. Yeah. I think I've seen that happen at previous ESIP conferences in person, actually.
Great. We are still pending on other data sets. Yeah, so any other questions in the room, or Jessica, if you have other things that are hard or questions about uploading, yeah, anyone, we're here for it.
If I can talk about this data set maybe a little bit more, I think the value of adding these old data sets to a community now is that you can add it to a community and then a curator in that community can go back and do the recuration for you. So like here we look, we can see that they have all of their strings right now for affiliations, but most of them, if not all of them, have RORs. So you could actually improve the metadata that way by having the RORs uniquely listed and more machine actionable. USDOC could be one of any number of things, but here means Department of Commerce. And that could be released as a new version 1.01 or something. I know if we look at the bottom, it says the technical metadata says that it was created in 2022, but it was last modified in 2023. And you don't have to bump the version for that sort of metadata change, but you could if you want to keep like internal track or something. And then you could also have, say, I could imagine a future where there's a bot that goes out and just consistently adds in new related works. I actually think Zenodo, other publishers or some might be working to do that already as the DataCite knowledge graph builds up and it sees more publications that are citing this data set, and then it can stick it in automatically. But until we get to that point, you could do it, say, on a community by community basis. I could see something existing like that there.
Hey, so this is Jessica. Really, really great points. I have been thinking about specifically the roars and the orchids. And so I've been publishing data sets since like 2015 or 16, and we didn't start doing orchids and roars until quite recently.
Yeah.
So, and really the whole point of the PIDs is to get as much linkages as you can. But then how do we go through and, like half the people listed here don't work for NOAA anymore.
Exactly.
And how would we, and the whole point is like, you need to be able to know that it is their orchid. And so, but that's an interesting point about, making sure that as a best practice, you periodically go and refresh your stuff, right? And building that in, I think that's where a community might be great, because a community manager could maybe ping everyone and say, hey, now's the time for your annual, take a look at your stuff. But in practice, I think it's more like a project. You're like, okay, well, now somebody's paying me to sit down and go through all the stuff over the past 10 years and recurate. Is that what you said?
Yes, recurate.
That's really hard word to say. And do that, and then maybe wait 10 more years for the next new PID thing. I don't know.
Yeah, and so at NCAR, we had a database where we tried to get people to link their orchids into our central database. And so if we have reasonable confidence that this person was a creator of this data set, we could go through and do it for them. Like, we don't, entering text in a field is not something that should take a PI's time to do, even if that might be the 100% trustworthy way in that that's the person that actually did that. Do we have 100% trust that they're actually going to do it the way they're supposed to do it, or spend the time to do it? This is entering text in a text field is something we can outsource to an intern, or better yet, an AI.
This is an interesting, can we take a little sidebar into talking about what a data management or data stewardship, data archiving workforce might look like? I mean, there's this idea in the scientific community that the PI, right, is in charge of all of these things. But in practice, the PI has a team, and somebody on that team is like a second-year grad student who probably would get a lot of great practice doing this, so that when they launch into their things, they already know how to do all this, right? But so in thinking about a lab, a larger lab, maybe not necessarily a university lab where we don't have grad students, is this the sort of thing that would be a human's full-time job? It kind of depends on the volume, like how many things does this lab produce? And if you haven't reached that critical mass where you need to hire a full-time person, there's the problem. Then you're kind of stuck with the PIs doing this. You have to reach a critical mass. So, I've been really thinking about that in the context of my federal agency, but I'm sure it applies to other organizations as well.
So, okay, go ahead, Kate.
Sure. So this is Kate Wing with Intertitle Agency, and there's a bunch of us in the room who are all like looking eagerly at the microphone about how to jump in on this. So a couple of levels of responses. One is that we at Intertitle are working with a bunch of clients on this and working with OpenScapes and talking sometimes to Eli Holmes about repositories and data stewardship and what it means to be a data steward and what it means to be kind of an expanded data steward beyond the kind of strict Amazon style, like tech version of Data Stewards with that eye towards engagement and sharing. If you are coming to the creating a DMP resource for the ESIP community session at 2, today, there will be a bunch of discussions as part of that data management and sharing plan design, and certainly talking to Rachel and Alicia and Joseph and others who worked on that can give you more advice about that. But a big part of that plan is about really being specific about the roles and responsibilities of everybody. As you just said, it's a whole team. Sometimes the most junior person gets stuck with a bunch of stuff. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes I think for many people working in this space, the goal is to recognize the skills needed, the type of work that is being done, and actually like promote and give people tenure for data stewardship, not just see it as a thing that is an afterthought that maybe gets done at the end of a project hurriedly, and maybe data gets published or not. So definitely interested in continuing this conversation about what you see as the needs within your agency and how to kind of get this work done and make it a habit and daily, weekly practice, not just, oh no, what's all this stuff on my desktop, panic, I have 3 hours kind of thing. But it is a real kind of like mindset and performance objective shift in some ways, where it's thinking about how to really recognize and reward and train people to make sure that data gets out there the way it needs to get out there, rather than just kind of meets the initial project thing. Rachel.
And just to interject quickly, that was my full-time job, to actually handle people's data and metadata.
To build on what Kate was saying, I think also, and what I tried to highlight in some of the introductory slides for this session, about practicing data stewardship at sort of different levels and in different ways. You know, so maybe the PI or a more senior person isn't actually the one creating the metadata files or doing the QA/QC on the data, but they're setting up the conditions where a more junior person, you know, they're giving the junior person time to do that, instruction to do that. And so they're still being a good data steward, the senior person, by supporting the people who are actually creating the metadata and publishing the data sets and doing that. So that's really sort of that mindset and that sort of community around data stewardship that I was talking about too. So.
A lot of this, especially with Zenodo, with the CLI, it appears as though it could be highly automated. Have you had a lot of experience using like Claude and a model context protocol to give it bash access and allow it to fully talk to Zenodo and push everything? I mean, as long as you're working out of the directory where the data is, it seems like you could plow through a ton of this stuff very easily. But that's sometimes a bit more than a lot of your regular web ChatGPT user is comfortable with, so.
Yeah, I have had Claude run to write scripts, but because this was a one-off migration, we did not, you know, automate anything. I could certainly see it in that way, especially because Claude or AI agents generally don't have mouse level access and can click on buttons. You have to go through the GUI to actually publish anything. You cannot send it through the API.
Okay.
So a human has to be in the loop right now. It could be in the future that a human does not need to be in the loop.
Right.
And we can revisit this conversation again then.
Yeah.
Eli, in the back.
So I'll ask the question, and then I'll give a little context behind the question. So I'm at NOAA Fisheries, but I'm also my line office representative on a lot of our open data working groups across NOAA. So I'm kind of aware of what's happening at the agency level. So we're in the process of kind of releasing our guidance about our data management plans, and also about, like, you know, where we want to be, you know, archiving data. And we have NCEI. I guess I'm giving background first before the question. So we have NCI, which is our official data repository, and there's lots of types of data that have to go there. So NOAA produces lots of kind of official data products that goes to NCI. But we also there's a lot of other types of data that our research produces that we would be putting in, say, Zenodo, other places. There's a lot of like domain-specific repositories that are appropriate. So this data that doesn't you don't call this official NOAA data. It's not like one of our surveys, for example. But then you get in this situation where okay, we have all this data, let's just say Zenodo. We have all this data going out on Zenodo. It's like these littler, smaller data sets. And there is no data curation, right? There's no one who would be really curating that, which is not to say that doesn't happen at NOAA. We have NCI, they do a lot of that work, but that is our official products. That's where that effort is. But all this other stuff, how do we get, so if someone puts data in Zenodo, is there a way to get that into something else to say, hey, I don't know if it's Data One or I don't know, something else, the wider world, and say, hey, I just put this thing here. I want you to know about this.
So just from the advertising standpoint or from the standpoint of, hey, I put this up, this is the best I can do, can somebody take a look at it and improve it, or?
No, for findability.
For findability.
So once it's in Zenodo, are there other data crawlers that go and look at this and say, oh, we'll put this on our list too? How's the discoverability for things, or how does the discoverability work for things?
That sounds like a great Chan Zuckerberg Institute proposal. Okay, it's not a great Chan Zuckerberg Institute proposal, but it does sound like something that would be very interesting to think about and how to build out that discoverability that isn't reliant necessarily on the knowledge graph. Maybe it needs help from word of mouth advertising in order to build out the knowledge graph to get there.
Okay,
I'm not aware of any repositories or systems that are generally crawling that to just make things more aware.
I'll add one more comment and I'll hand it there. The comment is that I think for our agency, it's unrealistic to think that there would be people devoted to that. We can hand that job off. I think that job has to come from the user, the person who's putting it there, that they do something to make sure it's found. Because all our data admin and metadata admin is happening in our official data repository.
Yes. And so just real quick, so we are over time. You can hear everyone going out for lunch right now. I'm happy to continue this conversation. I'll add from the previous session, I brought up this idea of roving Wikipedia editors going around and fixing up Wikipedia articles. There could be roving data curators that are willing to go out and do this sort of metadata enhancement for you. Maybe there should be a community that says, fix up my data, make my data pretty, and then people submit their data sets, their records to that community on Zenodo, and then someone like me would go and start linking things through. I guess we're done.
I'll just make one comment in response to Eli's question, which is thinking about Google Dataset Search and having science on schema metadata to enable discovery via Google Dataset Search is one way to think about that discoverability. That predicates you having science and schema metadata, right? But does
Yes.
it? Okay.
Yes.
Google Data Search crawls all of the Zenodo records. So the second you submit, it generates schema.org search criteria for Google data search. So if you type in, if one of those, like if that NOAA data set is been crawled by data search, which I'm sure it has, if you put any of those words in Google data search, it'll be found.
Yeah.
I just did it on one of mine that I published last year and it found it as the top hit.
So this right here is open air. This is the EU's initiative to crawl everything.
Yeah.
It is very tightly linked. There's schema.org metadata that automatically generated. Google will crawl it and put it in Google dataset search. They feed it into Gemini and all of that because they want it, but you know.
I think another thing like federal partners should probably be considering at this point, at least from what's been happening at this conference, is creating a NOAA community. Like creating a, like, I know it's not your official repository, but if one of your researchers is publishing a data set that you want found and you want credit for as being the funder for, like, why not have some of your data managers helping people on Zenodo? And you know, there it is, you know? So anyways, and obviously my lack of understanding in this area is showing right now, but I think that we have to maybe break outside this mold that like NOAA only pays people to work on their repository, because in reality, I don't know how to find data in that repository. I can find it faster in Zenodo than
Exactly.
in the NOAA repository. So
I mean, this is a conversation that has been continuing for many years in between CopDesk. This week, in between the CopDesk session and the session before this, and now. So
I think I'm going to bring us to an end here. Thank you all online and in the room for a very good discussion, and let's go have some lunch. Thank you.
thank you, everyone.